We speak now to Professor Andre Duvenhage to share some insights into this. A very good evening to you, Professor Duvenhage. Perhaps I should first start with what has been said, that trigger events often appear to play a catalyzing role in the formation of coalitions for reform or change. Do you agree with this? And has it been the case in South Africa as well?
Tsepiso, good evening. Maybe the starting point is that I think it is correct to argue that coalition politics are going to be the name of the game in the future, not only at a local level, but also on some provincial levels and maybe even national levels. Now, this means that you must redefine the rules of the political game. And unfortunately, it's even more difficult than just redefining the rules, changing legislation. You need to meet certain conditions. For example, you need to have a functional, relatively stable state. You need to have certain levels of social cohesion. You need democratic consolidation. And I think we have a lot to do to reach some of these conditions. But what is important is that we will go to some other countries, we will read and listen to them and get their experience and see how we can take this back into our system and how we can promote our democracy through coalition
and
politics.
Professor Duvenhage, this is why I wanted us to understand the context. So if we're going to study other countries, we have to make sure that we match like with like. So the reason I was talking about trigger events is to understand what has led to a coalition government or coalition governments here, what has led to coalition governments elsewhere, and what are those those trigger events in South Africa that finds us in this place? What are those trigger events in other places? As in, it's one thing to learn from you, but for me to apply it to my own life, that is very important.
Tsepiso, you're absolutely right. The conditions in the South African political environment differ fundamentally from that in countries like, for example, Denmark, Sweden, maybe even Germany, and other countries where coalition politics are prominent. And if we analyze the conditions we need to address in South Africa, it has a lot to do with state building and nation building, but also with creating a certain political culture, and that is a culture of tolerance. When it comes to coalition politics, we must agree to differ, but we still need to cooperate in terms of the common interest of all South Africans, depending on the level we are working. Currently, this is absent, and what we are looking at, taking a look at, for example, local government in some of the metros, what happened in Sabotla and other places. What we saw there is that coalition politics has become the battlefield for political parties in between elections. The opposite should be the case. We need to create conditions, and maybe in some ways we need to formulate new rules, change certain legislations, work on the Electoral Act in order to promote more formal coalitions on the one side and create environments where parties can cooperate. But then we also need a code of conduct, strong action taken against groups, individuals, parties that are disrupting the political order, like we have seen with some of the parties.
Professor Duvenhage, you mentioned the operative word common, particularly referring to common interests, and I'm going to reflect on common interests in the sense that you then have different interests, as in the role players that are involved in coalition government. And some have said that, you know, coalitions can either be predatory or progressive. Can you look at those countries in Europe that would represent these two characterizations, predatory and progressive, and whom we can be learning from? Because we've seen the collapse of many municipalities, including service delivery, because of those different interests that are pulling in different directions, even though they all say they have a developmental agenda.
Tsepiso, I would first, before answering you directly, just clarify one point. My understanding is that democracy is not so much a system as it is a way in which you are managing a system in terms of a certain set of values. Now, our problem is not with the management or the democracy side. Our problem started already with the system as system, and we see systems that are dysfunctional. Now, the moment you democratize a dysfunctional system, then you create patterns of instability. When it comes to coalition politics, you enter even a higher level of potential political instability. Now, what we need to do is to get our systems functional again. And then we need to create the conditions on which we can build strong democracy and define the rules for coalition politics. I'm afraid we are not going to learn that much from countries like Denmark and countries that are extremely stable, where systems are super functional. We need to look at examples where coalition politics are providing more challenges and how we can manage these challenges. And this has to do with things like the management of conflict, conflict resolution, working within certain parameters of ethics and norms, and then order, stability, and security. I think, for example, a country like Italy will be a better case study than, for example, Denmark, or maybe even a country like Israel can provide us certain insights. But the fact of the matter is, the reality of our democracy is going to be more and more based on coalition politics. We cannot take the reality of instability anymore. We need to stabilize the process, and we need to continue in a democratic way.
Political analyst Professor Andre Duvenhage, thank you very much.